Welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us as the MLB is underway as far as their offseason goes. The qualifying offer deadline just passed literally seconds ago, and already we have a multi-year agreement with one of those players who just agreed to a multi-year deal with the LA Angels. That pitcher is Tyler Anderson. We expected him to be very interested in signing that qualifying offer, especially after we saw his career statistics last night. Anyway, if you've paid attention over the past few nights, we've been doing a baseball update for you guys every weekday for you guys, just to let you know what's happening in the world of baseball. But Tyler Anderson gets a multi-year deal with the LA Angels. We'll see what kind of terms come out, but it's just breaking right now. John Heyman first with the news, along with Jeff Passan. But great steal here for the LA Angels. They're going to have to beef up that team again in free agency. We'll see if this round of additions helps this team. Previous additions haven't really gotten them into the postseason. The Anthony Rendon signing obviously looks like an albatross right now, but the Angels make a big addition here, adding to their starting staff. The question will be, was it the Dodgers working with him to be able to make those pieces of his repertoire a little bit more effective on that team, or is it all Tyler Anderson and the growth of him as a player and as a pitcher anyway last year with the Dodgers? Of course, he worked to pretty much about a 4.5 ERA in 5 career seasons. Before that, before last year, pitching to, I want to say like a 2.86, 2.5 something, or anywhere sub 3 ERA. But a good deal here for the Angels, no matter what it turns out to be, because they need pitching. And the Shohei Ohtani was their only pretty much proven starter that they had in their lineup that was having any type of success last year. They need to improve that starting rotation. They need to improve that bullpen after trading away a couple of pieces out of it last year as well. So good get here for the Angels. Again, we'll see what kind of terms they are. Let's just double check and see if they've posted those yet. 3 years and $40 million. Joel Sherman with the contract update there. A little bit surprising as far as the average annual value there. That's less than $15 million per year. But they get him on a 3-year deal. Of course, the Angels are going to have to surrender some value or some draft picks here because the qualifying offer was extended. And obviously, at the deadline, he did not accept that offer and instead decided to go with the LA Angels. Other members of that qualifying class, anyway, include Martin Perez. We told you last night that the news was breaking that he was going to indeed accept the offer of the qualifying offer from the Texas Rangers. Interesting note, for players who do end up accepting the qualifying offer, they can still negotiate a long-term deal with their current club. So this happened back a few years back, I want to say 2015, 2016 with Jose Abreu and the Chicago White Sox. He accepted the qualifying offer, and before the season began, they were able to come to a multi-year agreement, basically tearing apart the qualifying offer and having that multi-year contract offer in place instead of that. But that's kind of your headlines right now at the top of the hour. Nathan Eovaldi, another player who was given a qualifying offer by the Boston Red Sox, has decided to decline that qualifying offer as well. A little bit surprising in his case just because of injury issues and those kinds of things. Great AAV at $19.65 million. Obviously, Eovaldi thinks he can do a little bit better than that. Maybe something like the Tyler Anderson contract is what he could end up seeing on the open market. Let's just check and see if anybody else. Looks like Jock Peterson has also agreed to accept the qualifying offer with the Giants. A little bit more news coming in on that Angels deal. It's not $40 million, it's $39 million, so that's, $13 million a year? I don't know. If I was Tyler Anderson, I probably would have accepted that qualifying offer, and if I'm able to duplicate that performance that I did last year, maybe I get in the neighborhood of $20+ million over a 4 or 5 year deal, and still get a bank an extra $6 to $7 million, but still a decent deal there for him. Let me pull up the page here for you guys. There we go. Alrighty. So again, it looks like Jock Peterson and Martin Perez are the only 2 players to accept the qualifying offer. We'll see if they end up negotiating long-term deals with their current club or not. But the rest of the other 12 players that were extended qualifying offers are now officially free agents with that qualifying offer tag still on them, just because they're going to have to give up compensation in order to sign them. Another player that was on that list anyway was Anthony Rizzo. Kind of surprised he didn't take that 1-year deal, but it seems like he wants that long-term contract. We heard that the Houston Astros view him as their top candidate at first base, so maybe you saw his market was a little bit more robust than we originally had thought, and he might see that as an opportunity to get that long-term deal done this offseason. If you're just joining us for the first time, make sure you say hello in the chat. Make sure you like the video, and make sure you hit that subscribe button. We will have a bunch of videos coming out as far as the qualifying offer deadline that's just passed. Remember, Rule 5 draft picks need to be protected today if they're going to be, or if you're going to try to protect them as a ball club. So we'll see a lot of different transactions. We've already seen a number of transactions around the league. Good note here by John Heyman. Martin Perez was also negotiating with the Angels before taking the $19.65 million qualifying offer. Anderson ends up with a multi-year deal down the freeway with the Los Angeles Angels. Texas really needs starting pitching this year. Very happy to see him, as a Rangers fan, end up staying in Arlington as opposed to going in division to the LA Angels. That would certainly be a very interesting twist if that had happened, but they get their guy. I still think he wants to end up playing in Texas. I mean, he's very comfortable playing in Texas. He said so much last year. He was really adamant about trying to stay in Texas, wanted to get a long-term deal done. Just wasn't able to get anything in the realm of what he was looking for. Again, I told you guys last night we could see something like the negotiations for Carlos Rodon last year, the negotiations that he had with the San Francisco Giants, taking that 1 year and option type of a deal. This being kind of that 1 year deal with the qualifying offer of $19.65 for Perez, and then possibly catapulting that deal next year into that 4 year, $120 million range, $100 million range, something over $20 million a year. That could be what Perez is ultimately hoping for next offseason, but a good get for the Rangers. Doesn't cost them a whole lot, especially as far as length, and they're going to still add some pitching around that starting staff, having already made the trade for Jake Odorizzi. Jeff Passan with the official results anyway. These are the players to reject the qualifying offer: Aaron Judge, Trey Turner, Xander Bogaerts, Jacob deGrom, Dansby Swanson, Carlos Rodon, Brandon Nimmo, Wilson Contreras, Chris Bassett, Anthony Rizzo, and Nathan Eovaldi. 2 players accepted: Jock Peterson and Martin Perez. And then we just told you guys about the ultimately declining the offer and then signing elsewhere was Tyler Anderson. 3 years, $39 million. A little bit of a surprise to see Eovaldi decline the offer. There was a lot of experts within the industry that expected Jock Peterson to accept that offer just because he was coming off of a 1 year, $7 million deal, and that's a hefty pay increase for him. Same thing for Perez, going from 4 all the way up to 19.65. The rest of the players who declined the offer are pretty obvious. Aaron Judge going to command close to $350, $400 million in free agency this year. Trey Turner, another guy who's going to get between $280 and $325. Xander Bogaerts, another guy who's going to get well over $150 million. deGrom's probably going to get in that $130 to $185 million range. Dansby Swanson's going to get another contract in between that 7-year, $175 million range that Marcus Semien signed last year to maybe upwards of $200 million. Carlos Rodon's going to get an average annual value close to $28 million. None of those are surprises here on the open market. Brandon Nimmo is the only center fielder of any true value on the market outside of maybe some trade candidates out there like Brian Reynolds anyway from the Pirates, Ramon Laureano, Ian Happ, but by far is the best free agent center fielder on the market, and he should command a healthy salary next season, probably in the neighborhood of what the qualifying offer was going to be with the Mets, but maybe over an extended period of time, like 4, maybe even 5 years. But again, there was only one other center fielder in major leagues last year who played over the age of 30 in center field for the entire season. Brendan Nimmo was one. Michael Taylor was the other. So we'll see if he sticks in center somewhere, or if it's maybe a couple years in center and then flex him over to right or left. Wilson Contreras, the top offensive catcher on the market this year. Defensive, a little bit of a liability, but it sounds like the Houston Astros are very interested in him, along with the other player who declined a qualifying offer in Anthony Rizzo. Would be interesting to see if Houston, who just got rid of their GM and assistant GM and Click and Powers respectively anyway, if they double dip as far as the qualifying offer market there. Chris Bassett, obviously this is one big dip here in free agency. We all knew who's going to decline that offer. If deGrom ultimately ends up going to Texas, I think the money Chris Bassett could get would be prolific. I think he's going to have that organization by the short hairs, and so we'll see where he ends up going. But he should command a very healthy salary, maybe even a little bit longer deal that might surprise some industry experts. Maybe something in the range of 3, 4, maybe even 5 years, depending on how high the bidding actually gets for him. But he is a little bit older of a pitcher. I want to say he's into his mid-30s anyway at this point. Anthony Rizzo, we just touched on him. Good defensive player, good leadership in the clubhouse. With the shift being banned next year, maybe we see the offensive numbers come back to normal for Rizzo. But he's slid back a little bit offensively in recent years. Still has plenty of power. Houston would be a great fit for him, both because of the short porches in right and left field. A little bit deeper in the gaps, but he should have a nice impact there. Last but not least, Nathan Eovaldi kind of touched on him as well. Injury issues for him with the Boston Red Sox. A little bit surprising to see him decline the offer just because it's a guaranteed $19.65 million. He must have a pretty strong market because there isn't a lot of talent out there on the free agent market this year. As far as starting pitching, there's a lot of question marks, and he would definitely fit that group. But now he has some draft pick compensation attached to him. Curious to see him decide to decline the offer and decide to go ahead and forge through in free agency to see if he can get a long-term deal done. But he is getting a little bit older, so maybe that's the impetus for him to try to get that long-term deal as opposed to getting the one-year payday. Maybe he's just not comfortable betting on himself at this point, especially with his injury history. But that's kind of your headlines right now at this hour. Just double check. There we go. Again, Martin Perez. More of the same pretty much there. Wanted to touch on a few of the trades that we've seen and a few of the movements that we've seen around Major League Baseball. Guillermo Heredia of the Atlanta Braves has been designated for assignment, a good fourth outfielder option. Probably going to see him end up on the free agent market to try to latch on with the team as their fourth outfielder next season, maybe even back with the Braves. But Brendan Shoemake is the former first-round pick of the Braves. He is now on their 40-man roster to protect him from that Rule 5 draft anyway at the winter meetings. Tonight is the deadline for that. Teams have to make those transactions. The Tampa Bay Rays, we told you, look out for some trades today. Well, we saw a trade. They traded a minor leaguer anyway to the Chicago Cubs. Still haven't seen the return on that yet, but those are kind of a couple of moves that we've seen outside of the qualifying offer window. Again, more players were selected, minor leaguers, trying to protect them on that 40-man roster. That's why you're seeing guys on the back end of back end of teams' rosters being jettisoned, cut, designated for assignment because they need that 40-man roster flexibility. One, to protect for Rule 5 draftees, or to protect from the Rule 5 draft anyway, but also to open up spots on the roster should they sign somebody in free agency. For instance, the Texas Rangers did their house cleaning about a week ago, sending Nick Solak to the Cincinnati Reds and getting rid of about 6 other players on the back end of their roster, Andy Ibanez, a couple of minor league pitchers as well that were on their 40-man. They cleared up those spots. A lot of teams are getting that done today because today, again, is the deadline. Another guy who was selected to kind of protect him, Johan Rojas. There's the deal, the Rays I told you about, Miles Mastruboni. I'm going to guess that's how you pronounce it anyway. 14th round pick in 2016, 27 years old, so a little bit high or a little bit older player, but they're very happy to keep him. Looks like he cracked the top 20 of Baseball America's list of prospects for the Rays. Rays are always very deep as far as prospects, so they need to keep their guys. Here's some notable acquisitions and moves anyway made by the Rays in recent days. Declined the option of Kevin Kiermaier. They traded Ji-Man Choi. Remember that trade last week to the Pittsburgh Pirates. Nick Anderson was put on waivers, has since signed a free agency deal with the Atlanta Braves. Roman Quinn, you might remember him from his days with the Philadelphia Phillies as an outfielder, was also DFA'd. Yacobonis put on waivers, and we mentioned Brendan McKay, the pitcher/hitter anyway, number 4 overall pick from several years ago, was also put on waivers. I expect him to possibly go to free agency and latch on with another team. Welcome in, John. Appreciate the subscribe. If you guys are just joining us for the first time, make sure you say hi, join us, hit that like button, and as John just did, hit that subscribe. It really does help us out. See if we can reach 900 today. We're very close to it. We only need a couple. One of the New York media this morning anyway was all abuzz because the Mets anyway claimed Stephen Ridings anyway. The Mets are going to need to improve their depth as far as their starting staff because they do have a lot of holes in that starting rotation. The bullpen has also been torn apart this offseason. Edwin Diaz is their one guy they brought back so far, but Adam Ottavino, their 7th, 8th inning guy, is going to be is a free agent right now. So they need to get some guys who have flexibility, and Ridings fits that bill. Could kind of be like a swingman anyway in between the minors and Major League, just kind of shuttling back and forth. I just mentioned some of the holes that they have in their bullpen. Seth Lugo's also a free agent. Trevor Williams. Jolie Rodriguez, Trevor May, Tommy Hunter, Michael Givens, who they traded for at the deadline. So they have some holes in their bullpen, so they should be adding at the this offseason. We should see some acquisitions here in the next few weeks. Mets like to move fast in free agency. Former Red Sox, I believe Jackson Rutledge, I want to say. Prospect for them. Oh, no, that's a different Jackson Rutledge. Never mind. But the Nationals making a few moves to solidify their roster. Just kind of going through this. We already mentioned the Wilson Contreras news. The Royals, of course, deciding to lock up a few players on their 40-man. We also saw the one-year deal with the Royals anyway with Ryan O'Hearn. Looks like that deal is for about $1.5 million. Very young team. Welcome back, Declan. A little bit of a surprise is that the Mariners are already talking about trading away their left fielder, Jesse Winker. Now, he didn't have a great first year with the Mariners. Wasn't exactly the top overall left fielder in the game like he had been the previous couple of years. And yes, that's with Juan Soto. But Jesse Winker's stats in his time with Cincinnati were that good over that short period of time. But he certainly has slid back in over the last couple of years. That's why the Mariners are looking to free up some space out there in their outfield. They're looking to acquire 2 outfielders. At least that was the quote Jerry Dipoto said to the media at that time. And so a little bit surprising to see them looking to trade one. But they do have some good options out there as far as outfielders. They have Abraham Toro. They have Julio Rodriguez. They got Long. They have a free agent in Haniger that could be brought back in. So they got some options out there in the outfield, and yet they're still looking to make some additions as well. The Mariners are going to be active at this offseason as far as trades as well. They have a couple of back-end starters that other teams have already been calling about, most notably Chris Flexen. Dipoto acknowledged that there's been a lot of trade activity around him as far as people inquiring about him. So we'll see if he ends up moving. Marco Gonzalez, another good veteran, kind of an innings eater guy, somebody who could probably get you through 2 times through the order, and then maybe have like a long reliever behind him. But both pitchers be nice additions as kind of a 4-5 in a pitching rotation. The Mariners are also connected to the international free agent Senga, so if they get him, that's a very solid 1 through 5 rotation, and then Flexen, along with a couple other starters, would then become available. We already discussed the Martin Perez signing or accepting the offer last night. So if you guys want to check out that video, you can check out our live from last night. We do lives every single weekday. Again, as I mentioned, if you haven't heard of us anyway, we're the Upside Sports Network. We'll keep you guys updated on everything that's happening from the top 4 major sports here. MLB, NBA, NFL, and the NHL. Today is the qualifying offer deadline for baseball. So 14 players had decisions to make. 2 of them accepted the qualifying offer, Martin Perez and Tyler Anderson. Martin Perez and Jock Peterson. And then 1 player decided to decline and ultimately sign a deal with the LA Angels at 3 years, $39 million, and that was Tyler Anderson. There's the case for it was 2019, my bad. Told you guys that Jose Abreu was the 1 player who accepted the qualifying offer and ultimately did not play. That was with the White Sox back in 2019 for Jose Abreu. He ultimately signed a contract extension. So we should still see some activity around Perez. I think there is some momentum towards a deal, but we'll see where he ends up landing, whether or not he just decides to play for that 1-year deal or if the Rangers end up coughing up the years and the money he's looking for. Again, Rule 5. Deadline is going to be this evening. You got to get those players on your roster. That's why we're seeing a flurry of moves. We may even see a big trade coming out of Oakland. The Rays still have a number of decisions to make with people on their 40-man roster, so they could decide to go ahead and pull the trigger early on a trade for the top catcher on the market, free agent or otherwise, and make the trade with Oakland for Sean Murphy. They're looking to go young with Shea Langeliers, who was absolutely fantastic for them last year. A good addition for the Oakland Athletics in that trade for Matt Olson with the Atlanta Braves. They got a good star level catcher anyway in Shea Langeliers. They just need to give him some time at the major league level, and they need to free up that catching spot. They've got like 3 or 4 catchers on their roster right now, so Sean Murphy is expected to be traded this offseason. We might see something like that happen as early as tonight, depending on how desperate anyway the Rays are to get him in, and 2, to clear off their roster spots. So whenever you see deadlines, teams are going to make deals, and we could see a handful of significant deals today, most notably the Sean Murphy deal. Manager of the Year results are going to be announced tonight as well. as far as picks, okay, for the American League, you have Terry Francona, Brandon Hyde, and Scott Service, Guardians, Orioles, and Mariners, respectively. For my money, I think it's still going to have to probably go to Terry Francona. Nobody really had them going anywhere this year. Everybody knows they have really good starting pitching, but it's young. Their offense was much better than expected. They went more contact heavy. That was the number one thing that they were actually looking for in their lineup. That's the one thing they did better than any other team this year, was they were able to hit consistently for hard contact. They didn't really have power numbers, which is the difference into why they were able to get to where they were last year. And just ultimately it ran out of steam, but they had a very good year. Terry Francona deserves a lot of credit for that. Scott Service, I think, is going to be right there with him, though. They haven't made the playoffs in 21 years until this year. And a lot of that has to do with Rookie of the Year, Julio Rodriguez, kind of giving them a jump start anyway early on in the season. Even though he was injured in the back half of the season for a few weeks anyway, that kind of still catapulted them. They made the trade acquisition of Luis Castillo, so DePoto could also be up for or in my mind, should be considered as one of the executives of the year. And then Brandon Hyde almost leading the Orioles, who nobody thought would be in contention, almost all the way to the wild card spot this past year. Adley Rutschman played like an MVP down the stretch. But for me, it's Francona 1, closely followed by Service. I could take either one of them as the manager of the year in the American League. Brandon Hyde 3rd. On the National League side, Brian Snitker of the Braves, Dave Roberts of the Dodgers, and Buck Showalter. Those are at least the finalists. I'm curious to see. Rob Thompson should get some votes, honestly. He was able to kind of keep that team steady, especially after the firing of Joe Girardi. But he didn't manage the full season, so he didn't really have to go through the full season issues that they had. Buck Showalter, able to manage all the expectations in a New York market, did very well. Dave Roberts, 111-win team. Still not enough in the postseason, but it's a regular season award. Brian Snitker, the second half of the year, ever since they brought up Michael Harris and Strider in that rotation anyway, they kind of took off. They were 75-36, I want to say, over their final 100 or so games. That's a very great clip anyway for the Braves, but I don't know. For my money, I'd probably go Showalter just because how he had managed expectations, but that second half, that final month of the year might hurt him because they should have done better than what they did in the month of September. Their offense just failed at the wrong time. Their starting staff started to crumble a little bit just when they needed them the most. Dave Roberts, kind of just steady Eddie all year long, and then the Braves again, as I mentioned, a great second half of the year. So pretty tight race in the NL, but for me, the American League should be between Francona and Service. On the NL side, I would probably lean more Showalter just because of the managing the expectations with New York, bringing in the health or dealing with the health of DeGrom and Scherzer, keeping them healthy for the majority of the season once they were on the active roster. And then that was the headline last night with the Astros prioritizing Anthony Rizzo. Let's just double check and see if any other news is broken over the last few minutes. There we go. 33. Looks like about 5 minutes ago, Jesse Rogers of ESPN says that they have a multi-year deal with Anthony Rizzo going back to the Yankees. So maybe that's why he didn't accept the qualifying offer, because he did want that long-term security. Sorry for the Astros fans out there. I know you were interested in possibly getting a guy off of that Yankees team, making them a little worse while making you a little bit better. Anthony Rizzo, the leadership he brought last year was very valuable to them. Brian Cashman, when speaking with reporters at the GM meetings last week, said Rizzo's leadership was invaluable, especially when they had their struggles down the stretch in September. The clubhouse issues that they had with Aroldis Chapman, Aaron Boone basically saying, nope, you're not allowed around this team anymore. Anthony Rizzo kind of kept everything steady, even while they were dealing with the Aaron Judge news of it all, the offseason, whether or not he was going to stay or go, whether or not he was going to hit 61 home runs or not. Anthony Rizzo was that leader in the locker room for them, not Aaron Judge, and so a very good add back to that Yankees organization. They were going to need a first baseman, I believe, this offseason. A little bit surprising that they went ahead and got this deal done quickly, but maybe the news that the Astros were prioritizing him in free agency made them think a little bit quicker that, hey, we just need to go ahead and push our chips to the center and keep Anthony Rizzo. Other news from the other day, anyway, is that the San Francisco Giants seem to have cooled their heels a little bit in the market for Aaron Judge. A little bit surprising just because they're told that they told us at the GM meetings that no free agent was going to be outside of their ability a couple days ago, and yet here they are saying they don't want to necessarily commit most of their free agency dollars to a guy like Aaron Judge when they could spread that money around a little bit. A little bit surprising to see that happen. Welcome in, Anthony. I'm so confused when some of these sports writers that cover baseball say that these players sign multi-year deals with current teams. Why not just say that they signed for the amount of years that they signed? It's because they're trying to get the news out as quickly as they hear it so that they can be the guy that goes, hey, I did it first. I mean, a lot of people who do this stuff on YouTube try to do the same thing. I mean, when I first started doing this, I would try to be the first guy on the internet trying to put out the video so I'd get my content viewed. That's why they do it. And then they try to follow up, get people to look at their Twitter feed, see a whole bunch of tweets. I mean, it's money for them. Here is the contract details for Anthony Rizzo and the Yankees. 2 years, $34 million, with an option after that second year for a 2025 deal. We are seeing some notifications here. Odell Beckham Jr. apparently has cut his list to 5 teams that he might go to. A couple of these actually lost last week. Cowboys, Giants, Bills, 49ers, and Chiefs. So we're getting some news here right about the 3 o'clock hour. That's why we decided to do a live with you guys last night around this time, because the deadline was 3 o'clock. Any updates on Pablo Lopez trade, or if the Marlins even decided to pull him back, or if the Marlins, I'm guessing, decided to pull him back on trading him? I don't think that resolution is really going to happen until we get towards the winter meetings, when the market kind of sets itself. Teams are comfortable with what other teams are asking for in trade. That's when I think you're going to see a deal for Pablo Lopez. I don't think you're going to see one before Thanksgiving. But the deal for Anthony Rizzo, if you're just joining us, 2 years, $34 million with an option for 25. The Angels were in agreement on a 3-year, $39 million deal with another player who has declined a qualifying offer. This one from the LA Dodgers, Tyler Anderson, going there. The Angels improved their starting staff. 2 players accepted the qualifying offer, Jock Peterson of the Giants and Martin Perez of the Rangers. Now, that does not preclude them from still negotiating a long-term deal with either of those clubs, but it does keep them with their respective organizations for next season at the very least. $17 million a year is pretty good value for Anthony Rizzo. Again, I think he wanted that long-term security. I think he enjoyed playing in New York. I thought big-time trades have happened during the GM meetings, or is that a rarity that happens? Well, the GM meetings are different than the winter meetings. GM meetings just happened about a week ago. The winter meetings, again, are kind of the business of baseball where big things are discussed. Um, the one in November is kind of where the one we just had last week was kind of setting of the stage for the trades. Teams kind of talk with other executives just to see what they're thinking. They say, hey, are you interested in trading, Mike Trout or something like that? And they say, no, of course not. And then, well, if you were, what would it take? They just have those spitballing conversations. Not to say that they would actually do anything like that, but they just want to get the lay of their land in November, come back to their own team, discuss what they learned, figure out how they want to attack free agency, go through their qualifying offers, which is today, go through their Rule 5 eligible players and try to get them on their 40-man, designate players for assignment, and you still have arbitration issues to deal with as well, projections for luxury tax. Those are the things we're going to be dealing with in November. It's very rare to see transactions happen this early. The decision the Mets made to sign their own player, 5 years, $102 million for Edwin Diaz, is very rare, but it was because it was on his own roster. We haven't really seen other teams sign other players outside of this deal now for Tyler Anderson going to the Angels. That's very rare for that to happen that quickly, especially to a player that's on a qualifying offer. I think the Angels used the offer deadline as kind of leverage in the negotiations for Tyler Anderson, saying, hey, either you take our 3-year deal, even though it's a lower AAV, or you only play on 1-year deal with a higher AAV. And I think the Angels used that to their advantage, getting him for 3 years at 39. Even though he's been a career 4.5 ERA guy, last year he showed significant improvement. We'll see if that holds. It hasn't worked in the past for the Angels on any of these big-ticket free agent items that they've made, and didn't really work out last year either, getting Noah Syndergaard. They were able to flip him at the deadline, though, and get at least a little bit of prospect capital back. But these big free agent targets haven't really worked out. Since the Giants pulled out on Judge, do you think that he ends up in Seattle or the Dodgers? Do you think he goes back to the Yankees? I still don't think the Giants are necessarily out on Aaron Judge. I just think that they're reconsidering their position because of how high the bidding is likely to get. I think that they're open to going up to $40 million if it means that they'd have a for sure chance of getting a guy like Aaron Judge. Now that they know that the Yankees are likely to go that high as well, I think that they're kind of pausing to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't invest all of our resources this offseason in this one free agent. There are other free agents out there that we could target and try to spend some money a little bit differently. Bring back Rodon, bring in a shortstop, something like that. Maybe bring in a Mitch Haniger, an outfielder for them. They do just spend $19.65 million on the qualifying offer for Jock Peterson. We'll see which way they end up going, but should be very interesting. $40 million is the total guarantee. $6 million buyout for that 2025 option. Honestly, if I'm Anthony Rizzo and things work out the way they should, I'd probably decline that player option, bet on myself to get more than $11 million in free agency, take that $6 million basically as free money, and a good inventive way to get a $20 million salary for Anthony Rizzo by giving him that $6 million buyout in 25, saving him $3 million off that luxury tax bill in their pursuit of Aaron Judge anyway. Good job of accounting by the New York Yankees. As Passan notes, Rizzo has grown very close with Aaron Judge over the last 2 years. Again, as I mentioned, Rizzo was the leader in the clubhouse last year for the Yankees, not Aaron Judge. I imagine Aaron Judge is very thankful for what he did, taking a lot of pressure off of his back. Do you think Aaron Judge could be the first player to get a contract and average annual value between $60 and $70 million? No. I think he could be the first one to get 50 if he really wants to go on a really short-term deal, like 4 years, $200 million, something like that. But I don't think you're going to get anywhere near $60 or $70 million a year. I think you're looking more in the long-term range. I'm expecting probably a 10-year deal to take him through his age 41 season, probably in the value of like $40 million a year. Think back to last year, Max Scherzer, an older starting pitcher coming off of a tired arm in the postseason, still signed for the richest contract and average annual value in Major League history, 3 years, $43 million a year anyway, and that deal was basically the benchmark for starting pitchers. We saw that the deal that Jacob deGrom is likely to sign this year is probably going to be very similar to that, maybe with an extra year on it as well because he is a little bit younger than Scherzer. But that's kind of the market as far as average annual value. Position players don't really get up to this height anyway, so we should see something around that $40 million a year before we get to 50, 60, 70. But if it's a short-term deal, a team that's willing to spend some money over the next couple of years that isn't really up against the luxury tax could surprise somebody and jump out there and get it. Say like the Texas Rangers, for instance, if they miss out on guys like Rondon and deGrom, maybe they jump out there and say, hey, we'll give you a short-term commitment in Aaron Judge, give you $50 million over 4 years, or 50 per over 4 years, something like that. I don't think that would happen because even if they missed him, I think the Rangers would still be willing to offer that long-term deal. Can you explain the difference between guaranteed money like you see in NFL, in average annual value, and baseball, or are they the same concept? Very different. NFL, basically welcome back, Bounty Hunter. Football basically operates in what I like to call funny money. They like to say the bloated big contract. You remember years ago the contract for Albert Hainsworth? They did, I think it was 5 or 6 years, $100 million, etc. He didn't ultimately end up earning every single penny of that. I think like 40 or 50 million of that was fully guaranteed. Baseball contracts are guaranteed. The only thing that's not guaranteed is the option years, because baseball contracts are just like that. I mean, they don't really have the only thing baseball contracts that are not guaranteed are the options that they get. So sometimes if you sign a minor league free agent, you say, hey, we'll give you $2 million if you break camp with the team. Well, that's an option. If the team picks up the option, he makes $2 million for that year. It's not like, oh, they call him up for April because they had an injury in their rotation. Then they say, we don't need you anymore. Send him back down to the minors, and now he doesn't get that $2 million. Nope, he earned that $2 million. So baseball, it's very easy. It's a lot easier to see where the money actually goes. Football, they can maneuver that money around. So, for instance, Deshaun Watson this year was operating on a league minimum salary for the Cleveland Browns, signed that big signing bonus. The signing bonus is split up over the length of that contract. When a player renegotiates that deal, sometimes they can save a little bit of money by taking some of that guaranteed money, converting it to a signing bonus, spreading that out over some years, and that's how teams save money against the salary cap in football. Baseball, you can't really do that kind of a thing. We saw the trade for Alex Rodriguez to the Boston Red Sox that was nixed by the union because Alex Rodriguez was willing to rework his deal to take less money. You can't do that in baseball. You can't renegotiate for less money. Players' union will not allow it, and so that's why he ultimately ended up in New York. Hearing the Orioles might be interested in Verlander, and you don't know what to believe. Well, I think the Orioles are interested in a lot of players. Do I think they're actually going to go out there and spend the money on him? Absolutely not. I think Verlander is looking for a much higher bid because he realizes the Astros are trying to lowball him a little bit. Remember, last year he was coming off of injury and still signed a 1 year plus an option for $25 million last year anyway. Obviously, he's become a free agent now. And he's looking at some of the big organizations out there that have some money to burn this year. Well, he mentioned in one of his and he was speaking with reporters, the Mets, the Dodgers, the Braves, the Yankees, and the Rangers are teams that he'd be interested in going to for a more lucrative opportunity. He made specific mention of the word lucrative. So Verlander's looking for money, and I wonder if Houston's going to be a little stingy because they're going to try to bring in guys like Wilson Contreras, and now that Rizzo's off the table, maybe they turn their eyes to Jose Abreu. I told you guys before the Anthony Rizzo news dropped, probably about a week before that Jose Abreu would be a great fit, kind of an on-base guy, would really fit the process that the Astros like to use. The ridiculous $500 million contract that Kansas City signed with Patrick Mahomes. I didn't look too closely at that deal, so if I remember correctly, it was essentially 45, and then he was getting bonuses and signing bonuses beyond that. But I'll go to that deal in a minute. But there's a lot of funny money when it comes to football. Very rare do you see fully guaranteed contracts, especially for big money. The biggest one that I can think of off the top of my head was the Deshaun Watson one recently. The other one would be Kirk Cousins before that, when he was basically had Minnesota in need of a quarterback desperately, and so they decided to give him 3 years fully guaranteed for $28 million per year. Those are kind of the first big fully guaranteed deals that we've seen in the NFL. Outside of that, the NFL likes to have flexibility to be able to spread that money out, try to bring it or to build up for 1 year, spread that money out in some of their losing years, that kind of thing, and try to build up that way. Plus cap overages or say a team doesn't spend all their money in cap 1 year, they can have that flexibility the next year in football. It's a lot different. They're two very different sports when it comes to money. You believe Lamar is going to leave Baltimore? I think there's a very strong case for that right now. But if I had to guess where he might end up going, I mean, his best option, at least on paper currently, would be either the Jets or the Detroit Lions. The Jets are playing much better this year, but again, they still have a lot invested in Zach Wilson. But we'll see where he ends up going. Just double check and see if anything else is broken anyway. Again, there's the breakdown of Anthony Rizzo's deal: $17 million in 23 and 24, with an option in 25 for 17 with a $6 million buyout. That means it's a 2-year guarantee worth $40 million. Again, creative bookkeeping there for the New York Yankees. That $6 million buyout would count against the payroll for 2025 should he decide to go play for another team. That $6 million would still be on the hook as far as for luxury tax at the time for the Yankees in 2025. Appreciate you guys joining us. Got about 15 of you guys with us right now. Thank you very much for joining. If you guys haven't already hit that like button, please do. We really appreciate it. If you hadn't hit that subscribe button, we'd appreciate that as well. John, appreciate you subscribing earlier. So in a baseball contract, there's less incentives like you have to hit a certain amount of home runs. I mean, you can still do incentives in a deal, but those aren't necessarily, like a standard contract. Like a team says, we sign you for X number of dollars for X number of years. Then, of course, just like in football or in basketball or anything else, you can have performance escalators. Say like you have an escalator for MVP, or an escalator for making it to the postseason, or an escalator for, in basketball, hitting 50% of your shots or something like that, or number of free throws, whatever you want to have the incentive based on. Those are different from the strictly years and dollars of a contract. And different sports treat those incentives differently. Hockey treats some incentives as likely, others incentives as less likely, so the only incentive that counts are the likely incentives. Same thing in football. Basketball is a little different. But for baseball, it's all about each individual year. So like we were talking about the $6 million buyout for Anthony Rizzo in 25, that money would count against the payroll for 2025. A creative way of lowering the AAV this year, saving that $3 million and putting it on the buyout in year 3. And if he gets hurt, he still has that extra $11 million they could get. That if he opted into year 20 or the 2025 option, then he could make some money while he's out for a year. And the Yankees would have to eat all of that contract at that point. So a good deal for Anthony Rizzo. Gets a little bit higher average annual value as far as the total guarantee because of the 19.65 qualifying offer. Right, they're incentives. It's not like, if player X is still breathing on day Y, then he gets X amount of dollars. It's not going to happen like that. Yeah, I got a video coming out here in about an hour. I've got it scheduled to post around 5:15, I can't remember which, but about that incredible catch that Justin Jefferson made. The Vikings, just an absolute thriller of a game. For me, the bigger question is, the Bills just keep finding inventive ways to lose. That worries me as they get closer to the postseason. They've lost a total of 3 games this season by a combined total of 8 points. So they're very good, but they're finding ways to lose games, and that starts to worry me as we get into the postseason. You play better competition. You need to find ways to win those games, not lose them. But the Bills, I think, are still probably the most loaded team in both the AFC and the NFC. They just kind of need to get their head on right and get Josh Allen to start finding the 5, 6, 7-yard dump as opposed to the 30-yard throw down the field. A little bit of a surprise here. Texas Rangers have announced that they have traded right-handed pitcher Dennis Santana to the Atlanta Braves in exchange for cash considerations. The Rangers roster now stands at 34 players. Reason why this is surprising, Dennis Santana was thought to be a trade commodity at the deadline before mismanagement by Chris Woodward kind of blew up his stats right before the deadline. They basically had him throw in 4 straight games. He went out there when he absolutely had nothing left in the tank, but because he was a team player, he said, all right, I got it, and gave up like 6, 7, 8 runs. He literally had nothing left in that 4th game in 4 nights. And Woodward just left him out there even when he was struggling and left him out there again for the next half inning. Woodward kind of went to him in the dugout and said, thank you for taking one for the team. And he took one all right, but I don't think that was enough for Dennis Santana. I was very poor management, and I think probably one of the biggest reasons why Chris Woodward is no longer the manager of the Rangers was his usage that day of Dennis Santana. That was abysmal. As far as the Atlanta Braves, they've added a couple of low-cost options now to their bullpen. Rangers do save a little bit more money here by getting rid of Dennis Santana. They're going to add some pieces to that bullpen. They have a lot of MLB rostered bullpen relievers out there. They have some starters that they're going to flex into the bullpen as well. So the Rangers have a lot of flexibility now with 6 open roster spots. They can go ahead and add a few players to their 40-man to protect them from Rule 5 as well. So we'll see which way they end up going. Cash considerations, whatever they end up getting back, more money they can use toward the pursuit of a guy like Jacob deGrom. We saw this morning that a headline came out that the Atlanta Braves were not going to be in the sweepstakes for a guy like Jacob deGrom. It just seems like the price is a little bit too high. And they're focusing primarily now on keeping Dansby Swanson. They're hoping his bidding doesn't get too high. But there's a trade right now from the Texas Rangers. Dennis Santana, relief pitcher anyway, goes to the Atlanta Braves. Another low-cost option that they add along with Nick Anderson a few weeks ago to add to that back end of the bullpen now that they no longer have Kenley Jansen. Seems like Iglesias is going to be their closer next year. Do you think the Players Association in baseball will ever allow something in the CBA to where these lower budget teams are forced to spend money during free agency? Well, we just saw that during the collective bargaining agreement. They've incentivized teams to start spending more money. They're instituting the draft lottery. They're saying teams that spend in the XYZ of the free agency, or that they spend XYZ every year, are not allowed back-to-back years in the top 3 picks of the draft. They're not allowing teams that are benefiting from revenue sharing as well to get that same benefit. Because it seems like the Marlins, Rays, and Royals have cheapskate owners that refuse to spend money. Marlins, they have been a little bit cheap. They have gone out and spent a little bit of money, but they haven't gone crazy. That's part of the reason why Derek Jeter is no longer a part of the Marlins organization, because he thought they should have been really in there for Nick Castellanos, and he thought the Miami native would really, or he would have really found a home there in Miami. He wanted to play there. Derek Jeter seems like he was very comfortable with the knowledge of where Castellanos wanted to go, and that was basically the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will. The Rays have actually been willing to spend money. They were actually not the lowest budget last year. They were $30 million over the Guardians last year, so the Rays are spending money. And they were actually willing to spend money on Freddie Freeman last year. 6 years, $150 million was their final offer to Freddie Freeman. A little bit surprising for a team like the Rays to go that high, but they were willing to do it. Now, the Royals, they've been going through a rebuild. I don't think it's necessarily about them being a cheapskate. I just think it's more about the Royals going through a very poor period of their franchise. I mean, you could do like the Rangers and go out there and spend $325 million on a shortstop, but if your roster isn't ready to support a player like that, then why are you spending the money? The Rangers, I think they believe their roster was a year or two away as far as their prospects finally hitting at the majors. That's why they went a year early into free agency. This was the year most people thought they should have entered free agency, not last, but they saw an opportunity and exploited it. They went and got two of the top free agents out there last year, Corey Seager and Marcus Semien. They also added to their starting pitching in John Gray. They had a first baseman take big leaps last year, won the Silver Slugger in Nate Lowe. He was probably the best offensive first baseman in the game in the Major League or in the American League last year, and that's saying a lot. The American League usually has some mashers at the first base spot. He was better than all of them. That tells you how good he was. Now the NL side has a little bit better first baseman, Freddie Freeman, etc. But again, Nate Lowe is right there at least offensively. Did the Rangers already hire a new manager? Because I thought they recently fired the last manager. My prediction, if they did, was Mike Scioscia. They hired Bruce Bochy. You can check that out on our YouTube page as well if you haven't been able to keep up. Make sure you follow us, subscribe to us here on YouTube. Check out a lot of our baseball conversations that we have. We have a few playlists out. I've been putting every single video in the specific sports playlist. So if you're curious what's been happening, make sure you check those playlists out. They do have every video that I've ever done in the last year at least. So you want to probably start at the last video that's on that playlist and kind of go from there. But they did hire Bruce Bochy. They needed to bring in somebody with a little bit more name recognition, especially since they got rid of Chris Woodward. His usage of that bullpen just wasn't good enough. He was good as far as developing younger talent, but he just wasn't good enough with the established talent on the roster, like a Semien, like a Seager. And so Bruce Bochy coming in, they should have a lot more rapport, should still be able to hunt down some free agents and still be an attractive destination for free agents now that Woodward's gone and Bochy is in. I'm talking about specifically the world when they were competitive and making the playoffs every year, and the ownership, they refused to spend big money and go over there. So you're talking about the Royals back in 2015 when they were competitive and going for the World Series. They spent a little bit of money. They weren't willing to go, $200+ million, but they weren't exactly the lowest payroll team in the league either. They were around $110 to $130 million if memory serves at the time. That was about middle of the pack, maybe just over the line for middle of the pack, so they weren't exactly scraping the bottom of the barrel either. They had a lot of homegrown talent as well. That's how the Royals are going to have to do it because, again, they don't necessarily have the ad revenue or anything like that say the team like the St. Louis Cardinals does. They have a lot bigger market in a very close proximity anyway, but the Royals just don't have that same type of a pull as a team like the Cardinals, and so the Cardinals are going to operate with a little bit better or a little bit bigger budget. Now, on the same token, the Cardinals haven't gone crazy with money either. They allowed Albert Pujols to leave. They didn't spend crazy amounts of money on these free agents that they've tried to bring in. That's why just recently they were thinking about changing the way they're doing it because they haven't found as much success with it in recent years. That's why you saw them being interested in guys like Nolan Arenado in recent memory. This past year they were interested in going possibly after Aaron Judge during free agency. That was never going to be a realistic target for them. But they've been in on some of the bigger names out there, Freddie Freeman, etc. But there never really were big considerations for those type of payroll possibilities for them. Looks like we got a couple more news and notes coming out. Nope, more news on just the Rizzo signing anyway. See, that's the issue. Also, teams like the Marlins, Tampa, and Kansas City, even when they have a little young talent, they refuse to re-sign them to major contracts and trade them. Well, I mean, they've signed them before. I mean, Tampa Bay signed Evan Longoria years ago. They extended the contract of Kevin Kiermaier. They've extended a few of their starting pitchers, not all of them, but they tried to buy their free agency years early. The Mariners did that with Dylan Moore. That didn't work out to their advantage. Teams like the Atlanta Braves have done that very well over recent memory. Ozzy Albies, absolutely phenomenal deal for the Atlanta Braves, Ronald Acuna, etc. That's how they've been able to keep these superstar level players that, if they did hit free agency, would probably be making these big time types of money. But they some of those deals just haven't worked out. The Marlins have tried that out. The thing with the Marlins, though, is they've been trying to fix things ever since the death of Jose Fernandez. That kind of set their organization back at least 3 or 4 years. That team had the outfield; all of them are all stars at that time, with a fourth outfielder in the wings as well. Their starting staff was very good, headed up by the ace and Jose Fernandez. They were adding around the periphery of that starting staff to keep them in the playoff hunt. At that time, they still had Real Muto as well right around then, and just things didn't work out for the Marlins. They There was talk that they would trade Jose Fernandez, but there was also talk that they would sign him to an extension. I mean, they had already spent the money on Giancarlo Stanton. I think they probably would have had to trade somebody just because the money just wasn't there. They don't have the draw to be able to support those type of payrolls. I mean, if you want to look at anybody, it's the fan bases for these teams that if you're not going to go to the game, that takes lots of money out of the pocketbook of these owners, and they don't exactly have the biggest pocketbooks in the world as far as the owners of the Miami Marlins. I mean, when your organization is losing money for you every year and you're counting on revenue sharing to make ends meet, those are tough situations to be in. Now, if they had a packed stadium, 100 nights, or they get, 81 home games a year, say they get 70 of those are sellouts, then the ownership might be more willing to spend money on those types of things. But jersey sales, etc., they need to make their money too. And yes, it's about winning, but it's also about product on the field. And if the product on the field isn't good enough, people aren't going to show up. And if people aren't going to show up, they aren't going to try to improve the product on the field that's satisfactory to necessarily the fan base. So the only time they'd ever get those fans back is when they finally start winning again, get overperformance from cheaper deals. And the Marlins did that for a few years. They started to get some improvement. They traded away a bunch of pieces in the likes of Christian Yelich, uh, Giancarlo Stanton, JT Realmuto, Ozuna was another piece that they could have used to get some pieces in, but they never really got anything to click quite yet. They made the deal with the Cardinals as well at the time. I can't remember what the deal was with the Cardinals. Well, you have a lot of transplants in those types of cities. I mean, the Vegas Golden Knights in hockey have a big fan base, and it's not necessarily homegrown fans. It's players or people coming from all over because the whole nation basically adopted them as their team if they didn't have a team that they're really a fan of. So they would go to Vegas, and the Vegas Golden Knights would be their team. Miami is another destination town. They haven't really tried to exploit that type of thing before. Try to take those fans of outside clubs or fans who aren't necessarily beholden to one team and draw them to Miami or draw them to these other destinations. Vegas did a great job of that with hockey. They did a great job of that with the Raiders as well. They took all that Oakland support and pivoted that there as well. Welcome back, Bryce. We do have Rizzo signing back with the Yankees. Did I just see a trade here? Okay, so not just a note from Jim Bowden. First base market for the Padres, Astros, and Rays, now headlined by the following free agents: Josh Bell, Jose Abreu, Will Myers, Brandon Belt, Yuli Gurriel, Carlos Santana, Miguel Sano, Jesus Aguilar, and Yoshi Tsugo. There's only two of those maybe three that I'd be willing to give starting money to: Josh Bell, Jose Abreu, and maybe Brandon Belt. Yeah, just like we mentioned a few minutes ago, Bryce, is that the Giants have kind of cooled their heels a little bit on talks for Aaron Judge. I think they see the money that it's going to end up costing them, and they might want to spread out their money a little bit. Doesn't mean they're out of the market for him, but it just seems like they're willing to consider other opportunities as well. I mean, I think you mean 70-30, not 70-40, but I get what you're saying. But I mean, the Marlins need to advertise to these fans, in other cities when they come to Miami, hey, this is your team, Miami's an international city. You should be a fan of the international team. I mean, think of soccer and Manchester United. It's not just people from Manchester that are fans of Manchester United. You got people, heck, I work with a couple of people who are fans of Manchester United, and yet there's an entire, 6 or 7 different soccer leagues that you can find before you find the team of Manchester United. I mean, there's ways that you can improve that. And I'm not saying the Miami Marlins are Manchester United as far as their ability or anything like that, but I'm just saying they have a different way of marketing themselves to those type of organizations or to those types of fan bases. Alrighty, looks like pretty much the news has pretty much died down over the last 30 minutes anyway. Just to kind of recap everything, qualifying offer deadline has come and gone. Qualifying offers were accepted by 2 players, Jock Peterson of the Giants and Martin Perez of the Texas Rangers. Now, just because they've decided to accept that qualifying offer does not mean that they're going to play under that deal. It just means that now they will be tied, at least for the next season, to that organization. They could still negotiate a long-term deal. Think back to 2019 with Jose Abreu and the Chicago White Sox as your example there. 2 players have already signed free agency deals out of that qualifying offer class as well. First, Tyler Anderson, just before the deadline of the qualifying offer, he signed a 3-year, $39 million deal with the LA Angels. He, of course, pitched to a 4.5 ERA up until this past year, which was a 2.57 earned run average for Tyler Anderson. He goes from the Dodgers crosstown to the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. So we'll see how his career ends up going, if it was just the Dodgers organization that made him pitch so much better, or if he learned a thing or two while he was there and can continue to find that level of success there with Anaheim. A good deal there for the Angels. They need to spend some money again because those acquisitions that they've done in the past still haven't worked. Anthony Rendon, due to injury and poor performance, just hasn't worked out so far with the Angels. We'll see how things end up going for that anyway. The other signing, of course, was the Anthony Rizzo signing. 2 years, $34 million with an option for 2025 with a $6 million buyout option that year, bringing the total guarantee to 2 years at $40 million. Creative accounting here for the New York Yankees to shave $3 million off their luxury tax bill this year and move it to 2025 via that buyout. I'd imagine Anthony Rizzo will probably opt out of that deal in 2025 should he be healthy. If he's not, he still has a cushion there of the $11 extra million should he not take the buyout. Well, I told you the Dodgers and the Yankees both were going to have to do a lot with their starting staffs. I think both of them have too many question marks, along with the Red Sox, and the pitching market isn't exactly deep or flush with prime candidates for either spot. Dodgers are still going to have to add to their lineup first and foremost, I think, and then they should look to the back end of their bullpen. They have some really good horses up top, but they don't really have the depth that they had in recent years, whether it be the loss of Trevor Bauer due to the suspension, whether it be the loss of Max Scherzer, Kenley Jansen out of the bullpen, trading away Kenta Maeda to the Twins. They've lost a lot of pieces in recent years and haven't really replenished them with as many pieces as they usually do from their minor leagues. The one guy that they had, Josiah Gray, they flipped to the Washington Nationals in that deal for Max Scherzer and Trey Turner. Trey Turner is expected to leave in free agency this year, possibly to the Philadelphia Phillies. So there's a lot of things to be focusing on if you're a Dodger fan. They've also made contact with Aaron Judge. Mookie Betts going so far as to offer to play second base if they're able to sign a guy like Aaron Judge. So we'll see how it ends up going. And the Marlins are up for sale. I was looking out for ownerships at Real Madrid to come over. When is Trevor Bauer back? I forgot him. I don't really know. I know he's still on the suspended list. I know he's suspended at least through this year. I want to say he could be back sometime next year around the All-Star break, if I remember correctly. But even then, I still don't expect him to be anywhere near the touchable for a team to go out there and get. There's just too many headlines around him. Next offseason, if things go right for Trevor Bauer, we could see him back in a baseball uniform. But, yeah, it's not looking good for him to be able to pitch next season at least. As far as the Yankees, they of course have Garrett Cole at the top of the rotation. Cortez is their number 2. Then they have a bunch of question marks after that. They're paying Luis Severino another $15 million next year. He has a whole bunch of injury issue concerns as well, but he pitched very well, a 3.18 earned run average as their number 3. And then beyond that, it's very limited as to what they can do with that staff. They are losing Jameson Taillon in free agency. There's no way they bring him back, especially if they keep Aaron Judge. Now, if they lose Aaron Judge, then I could hear the argument that they bring in a guy like Senga, they keep Jameson Tyone, and then they bring in a guy like Yoshida anyway, as far as the outfield replacement for Aaron Judge. But if they lose Judge, there really is no replacement for him. He is the heartbeat of that team, and they need to keep him there. As much as Anthony Rizzo is the leader vocally, they go as far as Aaron Judge takes them. We saw him kind of sputter in the postseason, and that's kind of how the whole team basically did last year. In the postseason, they all just kind of sputtered offensively. But appreciate all of you guys for joining us. Got about 15 of you guys with us right now. Thank you guys very much. If you guys have questions about the qualifying offers, any transactions, seen a few trades today as well. We just saw a trade of the Texas Rangers sending out Dennis Santana to the Atlanta Braves for cash, again freeing up a roster spot, saving a little money. They did the same thing with Nick Solak to the Reds, Andy Ibanez, Mabrys Viloria, a couple other minor league pitchers that were on their 40-man. They also sent out to the Cubs and I want to say the Brewers as well. But they've made some noticeable changes anyway to their roster to try to free up some roster flexibility because they are going to be active in free agency. I expect them to still bring back, of course, the qualifying offer, the signing now of Martin Perez on a one-year deal. We'll see if they are able to bring him back on a long-term deal now that he has decided to accept that qualifying offer. They are expected to bring in one ace-level pitcher as well, at least. So whether or not that means Jacob deGrom or Carlos Rodon or even both, they're going to spend money this offseason, and they need to improve that starting staff. They could also use a closer, Kenley Jansen. Probably could be had for around 3 years, $10 million, 2 years, $10 million to improve the back end of their bullpen. Anthony asks, if both Mad Max and Clayton Kershaw retire at the same time, who do you think gets in the Hall of Fame with them both having a World Series? I think both of them get in first ballot. I don't think it's that close. Max Scherzer, he's basically won everywhere he's been. He's been dominant. He's basically been the same type of pitcher everywhere he's ever been as well. Clayton Kershaw has reinvented himself this past year. We'll see how much longer his career goes. But I'm wondering if the wheels are coming off the bus essentially for both of them. How many more years do you think Kershaw's going to pitch? If he keeps what he did last year going and finally finds his second life as a pitcher, we could see Kershaw go for another 3 or 4 years. Mad Max, 2 straight years now, his season looks like it's ended due to poor performance or injury, or poor performance due to injury at least this past year. We saw his bullpen before his Game 1 start in the wild card round. We saw his Game 6 deciding not to take the ball and saying, hey, Walker Buehler, I can't go. You're going to have to go for me. We'll see which one goes. But if I had to say, I think they both get in at the same time. If they both retire that year, I think they both get in that year, or that when they first come onto the ballot. If the Astros were interested in Rizzo, I doubt Rizzo would go there. I don't know about that. I mean, Rizzo wanted a long-term deal, and I think if the Yankees weren't willing to give him the long-term deal, I think if Houston offered it, he would have gladly taken it. So I wouldn't be quite so cavalier about that one. Jackson Stevens has been designated for assignment by the Atlanta Braves in a corresponding move for Dennis Santana. Brewers select Bryce Truang. And again, Rule 5 protections are coming. White Sox select Brian Ramos and Jose Rodriguez. There's the announcement of the Anthony Rizzo. 12 players reject. We already went over that. Jock Peterson accepted his deal. And again, there's the deal with the Angels for Tyler Anderson. 3 years, $39 million. Welcome in, Sam. Appreciate you joining us. Who would you rather have, Brantley or Benny for left field? I wouldn't necessarily say Brantley for left field. I think he's more of a DH option at this point. I think he probably goes back to Houston because they're going to need, again, another bat. But maybe another team kind of surprises us and takes him as a DH. Maybe the Mets, they're looking for an upgrade at that spot. Maybe a team who misses out on on someone of the level of a guy like Aaron Judge or something like that is willing to go for him. But for left field specifically, I would say Benintendi just because he's younger. I would rather have the bat of a Brantley, though. So if I have a DH availability, say like the Texas Rangers, they have a whole end in left field and a designated hitter, they would be a nice fit for Brantley. They need some consistent contact. He would be a great fit for the Texas Rangers. Do the Marlins choose anyone in the Rule 5 draft? Absolutely. I think every team should at least bring in one guy via the Rule 5 draft. Now, I'm not saying you should keep him on your roster if he's doing poorly. I just think it's poor management for a team not to take a chance on these prospects when they're literally free for the taking. I mean, sure, you want to keep your own guys, and I get all that, But if you have the opportunity to improve your ball club, I think you should at least take the lottery ticket, and all it's going to cost you is $25,000 in the end anyway. So we'll see, who ends up getting selected in the Rule 5 draft at the winter meetings in a month or so. Brantley, I think he was injured last year. Let me get a drink real quick. Let's refresh the page just to see if anything else is dropping. Red Sox are adding another pitching prospect to their 40-man, Chris Murphy. Rangers beat reporter saying he was a little bit surprised it was Santana that was traded and not Josh Sborz. Sborz, of course, came over from the Los Angeles Dodgers. I think he was actually a Rule 5 pick a year or so ago from the LA Dodgers at the time. They were able to keep him on the 40-man or keep him at least on the injured list that first year. Kind of home run prone as well. Had some success being kind of a closer in the minors. Just hasn't been able to keep the ball in the yard in the majors. But again, the Rangers have plenty of bullpen options. They need to improve the back end of that bullpen, though, by bringing in a closer. They have some closers or players on their roster who have been closers in the past, and they're expected to bring back Matt Moore as well. And so we'll see which direction they end up going. Sam asks, what do you think it would take to get Pablo Lopez? We've discussed this a few times in our weekday updates anyway for you guys around the off season here. But for those of you who have missed it, Pablo Lopez, I expect to probably be dealt by the Miami Marlins. He's kind of their one trade chip that won't cost too much for other teams, while it won't cost the Marlins too much as far as their chances to win next year. And they could get a nice package. I think the Yankees should be the team in on Pablo Lopez most aggressively. Now, there's a number of teams out there that could use a cost-controlled starting pitcher. I think every single team would like to have him on their roster at this point, but I think the Yankees are probably the most likely destination because they're going to have to save payroll somewhere. Getting a guy like Pablo Lopez gives them a cheap option for their starting staff. Giving them a number 3 in that rotation would be a good get, along with bringing in another starter as well to lengthen out that staff. The Dodgers have also been interested in the past, the Toronto Blue Jays as well. But I think the Blue Jays are going to try to bring in Senga and just go with their rotation that they have right now and just hope for improved performance from 3 of their starters who have had good track records in the past. Have the Rays done anything? They've made a lot of different moves around the periphery of their roster today. They made a trade with the Cubs, trading away a prospect to free up a 40-man spot. They've made a couple of prospect moves as well. Designated a bunch of people for assignment. Roman Quinn. We told you about Nick Anderson. They made some other moves as well. Brendan McKay was the move that they sent to waivers yesterday. He probably gets a free agent deal with another club. Welcome in, Kenny. Appreciate you. I do what I can. Just got to keep it going anyway. But MLB deadline for the qualifying offers was at 3 o'clock today. We told you guys we'd be here from 3 to 4. So got a little active chat anyway, so figure we'll hang out with you guys a little bit longer. We'll have another live for you guys this evening, kind of updating you guys on what happens between the end of this live and this evening. I have a video coming out here in about an hour about the Vikings and Bills game from Sunday, so make sure you check that out here in about an hour. And if you haven't already, hit that like button and subscribe. Thank you, John, for subscribing earlier in this live. And welcome back to those of you who have already subscribed. Anthony, I know you subscribed before. Kenny, Bryce, etc. Thank you very much. Rangers have been very active so far in free agency / the trade market, trading away a bunch of their back end of their roster players. The most notable, or the latest one being Dennis Santana. They also dealt away Nick Solak, Andy Ibanez, Mabrys Viloria, a couple other minor league pitchers. They made the move of Allard for Odorizzi, only cost them $2.5 million investment for a number 5 starter. Now they get their ace from last year back in Martin Perez, with the expectation that they're still going to add either Rodon or DeGrom in free agency. They still have John Grace. Their starting staff looks significantly better already on paper, and they still have a lot of prospects in the weeds that they could bring up middle of the season or even next year. I expect them to probably try to bundle a few of them together this offseason in a trade, possibly for a left fielder DH option. Somebody brought up Michael Brantley a little bit ago. He could be an option, kind of a cheap option on the free agency market. Now, I'm not saying cheap as far as $5 million or less. I think he's still going to cost between $10 and $15 million. But that's a very good bat, and I think the Rangers would really like to have somebody like that on their roster. All right, Bounty Hunter, have fun. Have a good one. But I think we're about to check out here as well. Appreciate all of you guys for joining us. Got 17 minutes. Let me see here. Can you read my comment from before about the last pair you can remember in the last 15 years that worse fall from grace than a top 3 draft pick in the Rule 5? As old as a baseball fan in the last 15 years, who is the best player you can remember that had the greatest fall from grace from being a number 1 overall pick to the Rule 5 draft pick? Probably Josh Hamilton. I think he was a Rule 5 draft pick of the Cincinnati Reds from the Tampa Bay Rays at the time. I think that's where it came from anyway, but that was probably the largest fall from grace and then back up again. I think he was a Rule 5 pick if I remember correctly. Going from Tampa to the Reds and then the trade for Edison Volquez in exchange for Carlos Lee and Josh Hamilton. I think that was the deal. Or no, not Carlos Lee. That was the Nelson Cruz deal that he was in. But I think it was Josh Hamilton going to the Reds from the Rays as far as a Rule 5. But Sam asked, what pitchers do you think the Rangers could trade for? There's a number of them out there on the market right now. I think their priority, of course, up until today was bringing in Martin Perez. They can still negotiate a long-term deal with him before the season begins. So I think they would probably put the long-term negotiations with Perez on the back burner, at least for now, and probably try to focus on the free agent market first and foremost. I think they just took an opportunity at the GM meetings that Chris Young was probably asked by the Atlanta Braves, hey, we got a guy who said he was going to opt into his player option of $12.5 million. We already have a set rotation. We don't necessarily need him on our roster. Would you give us a bag of beans for him? And they gave him a bag of beans. But the Rangers made him basically pay for the entire salary of him, giving the Rangers $10 million to pay for that salary. But as far as trades that are out there, I don't think that the Rangers are very interested in a guy like Pablo Lopez. I think they want cost-controlled starters, but maybe if they're able to package together some pieces, I could see them going for a guy like Lopez. But I don't think he's really on their radar. There are some other options that are out there on the trade market that might interest them a little bit more. I think they're looking for more ace-level type of pitchers rather than middle-of-the-rotation starters, that kind of thing. So if you're looking at starters, maybe a guy like Shane Bieber of the Guardians might make some sense for the Rangers. They've tried going to Cleveland before for Corey Kluber. In my opinion, that was a good trade at the time, but of course they only got 4 innings pitched out of Kluber. They gave up Delino to Shields, who ultimately ended up back with the Texas Rangers organization. But that also cost them the closer of the Guardians right now in Emmanuel Clase, and so it was a little bit costly for them. But we could see them going for, again, more ace-level pitchers rather than middle-of-the-rotation starters. The way Pablo Lopez pitchers, do you think actually do well in the stream? In the team the Rangers play, or I'm guessing you mean style the Rangers play. Do you think you'd more for the Giants or Dodgers? I think Pablo Lopez would do very good in any one of the 3 markets, the Yankees, the Dodgers, or the Giants. I think the Giants already are happy with their staff right now. I don't think they make a play for Pablo Lopez. I think if the Blue Jays are unable to get Senga to come and are unhappy with the way the free agent market looks for other starters, they could make a deal for a guy like Pablo Lopez. But I think the Yankees are going to basically have the final say when it comes to trade for Pablo Lopez, just because I think they want him the most. Who do you think the Rangers can give up in terms of trade, though? As far as major league ready players, I would say that first and foremost they could look at one of their second basemen to possibly move out. I mean, they have a couple of them that have already played up on the major league level. Josh Smith has some good contact rates. Really needs some everyday play at shortstop to be more effective, though. Another guy could be on the move, Ezekiel Duran, as far as offense. Pitching, though, is where I think they could make some more moves. I mean, they have Dane Dunning, of course, in the rotation, but hasn't really lived up to the hype that he once had with the Washington Nationals and then with the Chicago White Sox. They also have Cole Winn and Cole Ragans that they could move as far as rotation pieces. They got some bullpen arms that could be had as well. middle relief type of pitchers. There are some benefits to the way the way the Rangers are going about it. They're bringing in free agents and allowing those homegrown guys to be able to bring them more value. And I could see them making a deal for Josh Smith or Ezekiel Duran for a good controllable player, whether that be a left fielder or a center fielder or a starting pitcher or a closer, something like that. We could see something like that happen. I mean, the Guardians have needed outfield help for years. Maybe they say a guy like Smith could be a multi-position player, much like they use Jose Ramirez, except Ramirez obviously has way more power than Smith ever will. But maybe they see the flexibility of a guy like Smith and say, hey, he could be the next guy to flex around the infield. And then the power bat that Duran brings to the table, maybe something like that could work for a team like the Guardians who are looking to stay relevant right now. Marlins, if you're looking to improve your outfield as far as offensively, giving more consistent at bats to Ezekiel Duran, who probably doesn't have a role on the Texas Rangers going forward. Maybe you try to pry him away. And the Rangers aren't necessarily going to be able to reap the full value of Duran just because he's blocked at the major league level, but he's still a very good talent as far as offense and power. Instead of going to the Yankees or Rangers, who in stadiums that are more hitter friendly, and Pablo is a strikeout pitcher and tends to give up a lot of home runs. Um, well, it's all about the market. I mean, there are teams out there that would love to have a controllable starting pitcher. The Mariners were linked to Pablo Lopez as well. I know you're a Marlins fan, so you're kind of wanting to get some information as to where you might see a trade end up percolating. But for my money, I think it's all about the teams that are interested more than the possibility of going for a few years ago. Remember how the Atlanta Braves had the largest stockpile of free agents in recent memory? How everybody was trying to make trades with them on a daily basis. How everybody wanted to pry away this prize prospect or that prize prospect. Well, obviously it's not that way anymore, but teams like to value those prospects, and while you may value those level of pieces, they might not value the piece that you have to trade them in return. Looks like we're going to see some moves here for the Texas Rangers, some additions to the 40-man roster before the Rule 5 declaration. We could possibly even see some more trades from the Rangers today. Rays, of course, still have some flexibility as well that they need to make some moves on. John Paul Morosi makes an interesting note here about Justin Verlander. Justin Verlander to the Dodgers just became more realistic based on today's events. Specifically, Anderson rejecting the Dodgers qualifying offer. Signing Verlander would not involve the loss of a pick, whereas Jacob deGrom would. Ken Rosenthal apparently is linking Verlander to the Dodgers as well. He was never, to answer your question about Ronald Acuna, he was never on the trade market. That was just somebody was just having fun on some comment section somewhere, and a reporter basically responded to him, basically saying that there's no way he gets traded. The value is just too insane right now for the Atlanta Braves to ever consider trading Ronald Acuna. I mean, as good as Shohei Ohtani is right now, as far as value, and even for 1 year, I mean, the value of him Shohei is probably going to be worth 6 top prospects, even with only 1 year left on his deal. Ronald Acuna is significantly more value has significantly more value just because of the dollars invested in Acuna and how much time is left on that deal. But that's an interesting note here on Justin Verlander. I mean, the Dodgers do need to add as far as need to add a free agent starting pitcher. Getting a guy like Verlander, that might be a little costly, I think, for more of a realistic option. But they don't lose a pick if they did get Verlander. They do get a pick back for the loss of Anderson. They reinvest their minor leagues, which has gotten a little bit more barren in recent years now that they've had to call up a bunch of people. So maybe that's the route the Dodgers end up going. Or maybe they just say, hey, we gained the pick from Anderson, we'll lose the pick on a shortstop, bring in a guy like Bogarts or Correa. One last update here. Okay, some news from Jeff Wilson, the Rangers reporter. Rangers are expected to add 6 Rule 5 eligible prospects to their class. Luis Angel Acuna, Dustin Harris, Zach Kent, Jonathan Ornelas, Owen White, and Cole Winn. Absolutely vital to keep those guys around. Owen White's really kind of come on over the last year, especially in the Arizona Fall League, is finally healthy after missing basically 2 years due to injury. He was once considered a top 5 prospect. He's once again considered a top 10 prospect in the Rangers system. Cole Winn, another first round pick, had a little bit of regression last year in AAA. He's another guy, if he performs well in April and May in the minors, we could see him back on the major league, or we could see him make his major league debut. Dustin Harris took some strides offensively last year, one of the best power hitters on the Rangers in the Rangers minor league system. Zach Kent, another good, kind of more of a pitchability starter for the Rangers. Jonathan Ornelas, if I remember correctly, he was the piece that came from, I want to say, the deal that we made for Ian, or that we traded a few years back. I want to say he was the player to be named later in the deal with Colorado, if I remember correctly. And Luis Angel Acuna, of course, is the brother of Ronald Acuna. We've talked about him a little bit as well. So that's kind of your news out of the Rangers camp. Let's update it one more time. Hal Steinbrenner from the Yankees, of course, when speaking on the issue of re-signing Judge, says we still have plenty of ability, and Aaron Judge and I have talked about this, to make other things happen too. Sounds like Aaron Judge doesn't just want to be the one piece the Yankees do this offseason. He wants to see improvements. So some news for those of you who are wondering about the Aaron Judge market, where he could end up going, what type of move we could end up seeing here. Knowing how Yankees fans are and how petty they are, can you imagine if they ended up with Xander to a major contract as a way to stick it to Boston? I don't know about that. I don't think they have any interest in a shortstop. I think they're going to go with Volpe. They do need to trade a middle infielder to try to free up some room as far as on their major league active roster at some point. Gleyber Torres or DJ LeMahieu, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa are the names to keep an eye on there. Now that they brought back Anthony Rizzo, expect them not to necessarily add Garrett Cooper, the first baseman from the Marlins, in a trade along with Pablo Lopez. But maybe they send out Torres and a couple of prospects in exchange for Pablo Lopez. But the Yankees have some work to do. They need to improve that roster. They need to improve the starting staff, and they need to put together that bullpen again. They no longer have Zach Britton back there. Aroldis Chapman, of course, had his issues, things kind of wound down for him. Imagine the career of Aroldis Chapman, how valuable he was to that Yankees organization, that he was able to bring in #1 prospect in the entire game, along with 3 other prospects at the time when the Cubs just used him as a pure rental, and then he ultimately signed back with the Yankees for $50 million. Imagine where the closing market has gone. The 5-year, $102 million deal for Edwin Diaz. Yankees need to reshape that bullpen. There are some decent options on the free agent market. A lot of middle reliever, 8th, 7th inning guys. But I wonder if they go through the trade market to see if they can get somebody of a little bit more value. In case you're just missing it, Anthony Rizzo has decided to re-sign with the New York Yankees. 2 years, $34 million, $17 million average annual value, with a $6 million buyout player option in 2025, bringing the total guarantee to $40 million over 2 years. Creative way of doing some bookkeeping for the New York Yankees there. The Texas Rangers had Martin Perez accept the qualifying offer for him, and the San Francisco Giants anyway have had Jock Peterson accept the qualifying offer there. That does not preclude either team from negotiating a long-term deal with either player. Tyler Anderson, another player who received a qualifying offer, has decided to go to the Los Angeles Angels from the Los Angeles Dodgers. Signed a 3-year, $39 million deal, cheap contract, good value for him. I'm a little bit surprised he didn't take the 1-year big payday and see if he can parlay that into a bigger deal next year if he proves his performance again. But I think he saw the writing on the wall that he's pitched about a 4.5 ERA. This is his first really good year at 2.57 ERA, and parlayed that into a 3-year, $39 million deal. When you look at both Volpe and Peraza, who's the better overall shortstop in terms of offense and defense? Volpe, and it's not close. Where they can hit for both power and average and possibly win multiple Silver Sluggers and Triple Crown and win multiple Gold Glovers at short. Again, Volpe, and it's not close. Oswald Peraza has kind of seen his prospect status fall. He's the one that the Yankees are willing to move, not Volpe. That kind of tells you all you need to know about which one they see as has more of an ability to stick at shortstop and have an impact, much like Jeremy Pena did last year for the Astros. Now that's more of the exception, not the rule. As far as rookies go, when it comes to shortstops, usually they do struggle a little bit, and so we might see some early season struggles for Volpe. They could play some of Oswaldo Cabrera there at shortstop as well. But they could DFA Isaiah Kiner-Falefa to make some room on their 40-man roster to call up somebody to save them from the Rule 5 draft today. We'll see if they make that type of a move. We'll update our list here one more time. Englert is the one player Evan Grant notes that the Rangers have not protected as of yet. Maybe they find a dealer for Josh Sborz and get that done. But Mason Englert, another good pitching prospect. I think he's pitching prospect. I could be wrong. For the Texas Rangers. I can't remember. Let me see. Yeah, he's a pitching prospect. Double A pitcher, 24. Last year in Double A. Pitched in 3 games. Spent most of the time in High A, 3.57 ERA. Good strikeout pitcher. A little bit of command issues from time to time. Okay. So that's kind of your update there from the Texas Rangers. Manager of the Year is about to be announced here in about a half an hour. Seems like Showalter, according to Nightingale, Showalter's the favorite in the NL. Francona is a slight favorite in the American League. We told you it would be very close between Francona and Service, in my mind, for the AL award. Showalter was my pick in the NL, just because of the way he handled that team coming in, the expectations, the pressure, and they performed very well all the way up until probably the final 3 weeks of the season, and then, of course, in the playoffs, just kind of sputtered out. Very unfortunate for the Mets, but we'll see how they do next year. Of course, they already brought back Edwin Diaz. They're looking to keep Jacob deGrom or Chris Bassett, maybe both, trying to keep Brandon Nimmo, and then still add to that offense that had issues down the stretch. But I just want to thank all you guys for joining us here as we updated you guys on the qualifying offer deadline. It's come and gone. Thank you, John, for subscribing during our live. If you're just joining us for the first time, hit that like button. We really do appreciate all the help we've gotten over the last few days. If you haven't already hit that subscribe button, please do. It really does help us out. We're really close to 900. For those of you wondering, you don't make money at this until you hit over 1,000 subscribers and hit a whole bunch of other checkpoints as well. But we're only missing the 1,000 subscribers at this point. So we would really appreciate it if you would. We'd really love to do this for you guys full time and put out a lot more content, a lot more consistent content for you guys as well. We will have a video coming out here in 45 minutes now. That will be about the Vikings and Bills game, so make sure you check that out here on YouTube. If you guys are curious about anything that's happening around the world of baseball, you can message me on any one of my videos and just send a comment, ask me a question. Fantasy football, basketball, hockey, anything. If you guys are curious about something, about a headline that you saw, or if you have a trade that you wanted to see if whether or not it'd be a good idea or not, you guys can send it to me. I'll help you guys out and get you the information you're curious about. But thank you guys for joining us. We'll check out for now anyway, but we'll be back later this evening to kind of wrap up the day in baseball. And thank you guys very much for joining us. If you haven't already, like I mentioned, hit that subscribe button. We really do appreciate it. Thank you very much in advance. All right. Y'all have a good one. We'll see you here in about 4 hours or so. We'll have our live back up. Thank you guys.